Yeah,
something.
they're in charge.
Yeah. So you see how these things can vary from one publisher to another. But I just had never had an experience like this with paper.
Well, even Dylan Roof, he's the alleged killer. You can't say. You know what I mean? There's things like that. And that was an interesting thing. What do you do about talking about him? And we kind of just naturally, when we were trying to recreate the real, almost like real time, where is this person, who is it? Because of course he was caught very quickly. And you did most of the research on his background, which was pretty horrible. But then, we never came back to him because it wasn't his story. I'm sure someone will tell it. But it wasn't really a conscious decision. But after that, once he didn't belong in the story anymore. Things like
you had mentioned that there were things that were taken out, and obviously you gave us a little more depth about the length of the words that you could use and the citations that you could use. Was there anything in particular that you felt you wanted to put into the book that they made you take out? And can you share that with us?
Well, I think we wanted to explore a little bit more with the relationship with golf and the church and the money. But then when you look at it, Reverend Goff, you all know
what
the
we're
presiding
talking about,
elder,
all the scandal
who was
around
the
the money.
interim pastor of Emmanuel shortly after, and there was a lot of controversy associated with his previous pastorships of other churches, not only in South Carolina but also up in Detroit, up in New York, upstate New York.
Out of New York and New Jersey.
But then when we pulled back and looked at it, his ministries at these other churches really wasn't part of this story. But if you got into the handling of some of the contributions of money to Emmanuel, we wanted to sort of write about that, but then that opened us up to potential.
Well, our editor, even though we wrote it only what was reported, right? Our editor was, Reverend Goff is very litigious. I mean, he's like countersuing, these churches and the people in these churches in Columbia who just really wanted accounting. I mean, and our editor is like, we are not, no, I mean, we're not going to go there. And so that part was, we also heard, like, there was rumors that Dylan Roof had been at Bible study before, but we couldn't substantiate it, even though they were from people who, pretty reliable sources, couldn't substantiate that, which would have been interesting, I mean, and all this will come out in the trial, for sure. There was stuff we had to pull out because certain people we interviewed in the end, everyone had to sign a permission, like a permission slip when you go on a field trip, people had to sign off on that, everybody we interviewed. And we won't say who, but one of the primary sources wouldn't sign it. I mean, I guess it was leave it at that.
But it would have been all right if it had come early on in the process.
Came at the very last.
But it came at the end, so we had to recast.
It was really a disaster.
Pieces.
Really a disaster. And so, you got to remember, we knew what we were getting into. We were getting into, first of all, so many people were affected by this situation. I mean, you had the immediate families and friends, and no two people grieve the same way under any circumstances. So you have this horrific grief that is, a murder like this is nothing worse. And then they've had a spotlight on them. I mean, I've had people say to me, and I'm not going to say who said this, I pray for a day where it's not what I have, like a day where I don't have to think about it. And, they're constantly being interviewed by people like us and the media and this and that, and they're so exhausted by it. And they're going to, the grieving process, and you all know this from just your own lives, it changes. And one of the things we did at the beginning is we tried to pay attention to, what did you call it, the low-hanging fruit.
Oh, yes.
But what he meant was, if we already know somebody, we have a relationship with the person, or we noticed they really seemed to want to talk to the media. Malcolm Graham, for example, that was how he processed it. He wants people to know about the life of his sister, not just the death, you know, the sensationalized death. So there were people who were very quiet, very private. And we, you know, if we emailed or we talked to the lawyers and we didn't hear back, just let it go. Some of the people we've met since then and said, well, I would have loved to have talked to you. Your lawyer didn't, you know.
Yeah.
So we really had to be very careful with all of that, and people change the way they do. And so, but we knew that it was going to be a kind of complicated, we were also dealing with a story where the trials hadn't happened. So we only had access to certain information. I say in the end, the great gift that Herb, knowing people, not only because of his childhood in Emmanuel and the people who he knew, but also as a journalist. You know, a lot of people knew as a journalist. So in a way, I feel in the long run, some of the people that he could interview who knew these people, and could tell stories, and people who remembered his grandmother, but they were a little more objective, in a way. One of our greatest sources, and I love telling this story, I talk about this woman in the book who I'd never met before, but she had been an usher at every funeral and lost 9 people that she loved very much, and she'd written about it. She'd been an English teacher at Garrett. She sent me an email. I don't know you. I love your poetry. I love what you wrote for us. She said, that's what she said. I still have her email. And I've written this material about what I went through. I don't know what to do with it. Would you meet with me? I said, would I meet with you? Of course I'll meet with you. And then I told her what I was doing, and I tried to be very careful not to really use her material, but she actually wrote out, I think she typed biographies of each of her friends. She showed me text messages from Reverend Pinckney that she saved, and played voice messages from Susie, and, you know, and it was just, I got to know them through her, and that just kind of happened because she liked my poem. What a gift. But again, her heart's broken. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to her, but she had a little bit of distance, because it wasn't her sister or her mother. And of course, getting back to what you said, her brother, this is an interesting story, her brother Thomas showed up for Bible study that night. And of course, normally it's at what time? 6 p.m. He's like, what's going on? Well, why is everyone, he didn't want to go to the business meeting. You know, he wasn't interested in the business meeting the quarterly meeting. And she said, well, I'm up at this big church in North Charleston, I forget. We're going to Bible study up here. Why don't you, she said, I just could have easily said to him, go over to Saffron's and get a sandwich and then go back up. But no, I said, come up to North, because he definitely would have been. So she had all those personal connections, but really told us things like, I'll never forget the email in October. She said, we're finally able to sit in our pew again. Things feel, you know, so she was kind of like a window into what, you know, no one's talking about what it's like for just that congregation and what they've gone through, what they, you know, because people kind of all sit in a certain pew, but there was always someone already in that pew. That disruption. So that was just a gift that we, you know, so, you know, for all the people that we didn't get to include or interview or didn't meet until later, there were all these other people, and we didn't have time to interview everybody. And we taped all the interviews.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, Marjorie mentioned that people change and things change. And so one of the things that, of course, is in the book is that whole treatment of forgiveness, and those family members that forgave, and so on and so forth. And that was so amazing to us to just kind of recount their statements. But just to make sure, because Herb and Marjorie did the interviews, and in talking about those interviews, we thought that they needed to go back to those individuals that expressed forgiveness on the record and see whether over time they wanted to recant, they change their feelings, and none of them had. But that's something that we check. So
Or even-
these are people,
Yeah.
and emotions evolve. So let's make sure, let's see whether that was a fluke in the bond hearing, but no one had changed.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And at the outset, we thought, did they plan it? Did somebody did a bishop or something kind of say, hey, you know, and it was, I mean, to hear them talk about the spontaneity, and how it's really an extension of what the families, of the loved one who was killed. Chris Singleton, who he just kind of went underground after of doing a couple interviews, and I'll never forget, he said, well, that's what my mother would have wanted me to do. And I think that it's in their spirit, which is really, we try to explain it, it's such a complex thing that happened, but kind of a miracle, I think. And I think it's what, I really do, I think it was kind of a miracle. And in the spiritual sense of a miracle, not like what my little 3-year-old godson would say. But, you know what I'm saying? And when you read what they say, and you go back and listen to it, you really feel that. And it's very strange to go back and listen and watch it, because you're looking at Dylan Roof while you're hearing their voices, which is very, very strange.
And then when you think about
You know.
forgiveness, you think about how would I would have reacted in that situation.
Oh, we just got this beautiful letter from a woman that read the book and decided, you know, I haven't spoken to my brother in 10 years. I forwarded you
Yes,
this letter.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, ultimately that would be the hope, that everybody would have a takeaway. And the fact that she was able to reconcile with her brother, who's in fact losing his sight, and she said, so first time he saw me in 10 years, he may never see me again. You know, that's the kind of thing that, and even at the beginning, we talked about that. How can we write about this so that people can somehow absorb this information and take it into their own lives? You know, I just was listening to a song, and I think we have to wrap it up. You guys know who Ben Harper is? I don't know what age group listens to music. He has this song, Blessed to Be a Witness. Anyone know that song? Oh.
You gonna sing it?
You wanna sing?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not going to sing. I'm not like Barack Obama or Reverend Piggy's Redeemer. But it's an amazing song. My friend Mark Samaker made me this CD because he thinks I need to listen to different music. But anyway, but it's an amazing title, and I thought that's what I feel.
What's the title?
Blessed to Be a Witness.
Blessed to be a witness.
You know who Ben Harper is. Anyway, so cool. But if not, that's right, yeah, we both teach college. Yeah, we know exactly. All right. But it's really what I think sums up how we felt. We were blessed to be able to
Yeah, that's true.
be here, to meet these people, and be able to somehow find the words and tell the story and be as true to the experience. But that's how it feels for me. You know, and that people open their hearts to us and their lives to us, and that's really a privilege.
And it showed through.
Well, thank you. But you know, what a responsibility we had. We never really, you couldn't really stop and think about that, or you.
No, I mean, when you have a deadline, you start
It's just,
writing
it was a
in
job,
August,
you know.
and your deadline is like in mid-December. It was more fear. It's like when you're on a wire, you don't look down. You just keep
That's
walking.
right.
But it was a lot of responsibility, huge amount of responsibility. I know some of you are gonna go, but anyway.
Yeah, we have a couple people who need to go over to
That's
the
okay.
College of Charleston for
Oh, yeah,
an
right.
even later night class if well.
Yep,
Oh.
that's right.
They're doing the 7 to 9:45.
Yep, okay.
Go, go, go.
Yep.
Well, at
But,
least you won't hit traffic.
But we have maybe we can have one more question and then we can just talk
Yeah.
informally if you
Sure,
can stick around for a
Yeah,
few minutes.
absolutely.
But what other questions that are out
Thank
there?
you.
So I'm going to put Asia on the spot because Asia was responsible she facilitated our discussion prior to your arrival, and she presented us with several questions. I was thinking of question 3 though, which I thought was you don't even remember it. I do though. So I think a really important question regarding kind of this idea of community unity, and if you could ask it.
Okay, so my third question was, Is the unification of races in Charleston as a result of the Manual 9 temporary or a lasting transformation in this community?
That's a good question, Asia.
We talked about that. I mean, for me, I think obviously there's been a lot of discussions that have popped up as a result of the event. But I think Charleston has always been somewhat, I hate to be so, it's harsh, critical.
Bring it.
Charleston has been always critical, not only along racial lines, but also class lines, even within the black community. So Marjorie talked about how segregated the school system is. We have somewhat integrated neighborhoods, but that integration is coming about as a result of gentrification. So the indigenous population are being pushed out, and newer people are coming in. And I think that is, at least from my own personal perspective, I grew up downtown, and I've lived downtown. I still spend a little bit of time downtown. That even in some of the established and recognized social justice movements, even within Cajun, you don't see, when I go to Cajun events, you've seen this, Paul.
Oh, yeah.
When the discussion gets heated, the white people leave. You know?
Not all of them.
You know, not all of them, but you can see it. And I kid Adrienne, my wife, I said, are they all going to the bathroom at the same time? Maybe, who knows? It could be, you know. But I think, and Bernie can talk about this, that, you know, historically we have been so afraid to talk about race that I think that is such a palpable thing.
Remember what Jim Clyburn said when they had the